Let's do a molten sword for actual beginners from a beginner. Alright, so today we truly are going to get into a beginner's guide kind of to molten swords. Give you something kind of cool to wow your buddies and things like that. If you're just starting out, it's all so daunting. You get on here and you see all these crazy videos and they're all telling you this is easy and that's easy, and the problem with that is I've done the same thing. I'm really new to the hobby. I mean, we're talking a couple months max. So I'm not using this laundry list of different products that all these guys have. And if you look at most of these videos, they've all been painting for years. And they've been sponsored by all these products, so they're getting all these products for free. I'm not. I'm not. So let's get into an actual beginner's guide from a beginner. So the products we'll be using today, they're all going to be the same stuff that you're going to find on your shelf at your LGS where you're probably going to buy your figures at. All right, you're probably going to buy Warhammer figures and to get kind of started into the hobby. There's lots and lots of different figures that you can go with, but the overwhelming majority of the LGSs that you go to are going to have these products. I'm going with Citadel, and most of your big guys, they'll light you on fire for that because they're all butthurt over over the little pots and everything's that are being used. They hate the pots, but it's one of those that okay, as long as you keep the pot really clean, like up around the rim, like you got the little edge that's inside of here, you keep that really clean to where it clicks down tight, you're fine. And honestly, the pots are a little bit better for a beginner instead of the dropper bottle. Now, the reason that I say that the dropper bottle may not be quite as good for a beginner as the pot is because you can choose exactly how much paint that you're going to put on your palette or your piece of cardboard or your finger or your table. I don't care where you put it, but wherever it is you're going to put your paint, you can actually choose how much comes out of the bottle. If you just get a tiny little bit on the tip of your brush, or if you just wallop your whole finger down in there and pow, slap a whole bunch of paint down. The dropper bottle, on the other hand, you're getting a drop. And then if that's too much, tough. You just wasted your paint. If it's not quite enough and you just need the tiniest little bit more, tiny little bit, you go ahead and put another drop, and then you're like, my God, that's way too much. So you don't get the choice. Now, you may get used to that amount, and maybe the more you paint, I'm guessing the more you paint, the more you do this, you start, learning how all that works. But as it sits, you have more control over this. As irritating as the pot may be considered, you have more control over it. Now, with that said, let's get into a little bit of painting. So, I'm using the same products that you're generally going to find at your LGS. The only difference is I'm using some really cheap brushes. I'm just using these brushes to prove that it doesn't need to be the really super high-end expensive brushes. Yes, will the brushes maybe save you in time? Sure. Will they hold out longer if you care for them correctly? Yes, they will. But to get started, you don't need anything crazy. The only place that I'm going to deviate from using Citadel is specifically in white. White, notoriously, is rougher on Citadel. It's usable. You can use it. It's fine. Shake it up real good. Make sure it's mixed up real good. But I'm using Vallejo white, and the only reason I'm using Vallejo white is because I just happen to have Vallejo white. I've used it a couple times. I like it. It's fine. But I don't really have a problem using white scar, and people light me on fire on that too. But I think it's about the best white that you can find with Citadel. So all it is getting down that nice light base. If you did your model like I did and sprayed it in a primer black, well, it's really hard to get those bright colors to pop off of it. So I had to go over the sword with a couple three coats of white so it had a nice bright under layer. But if you use white scar, you're going to be perfectly fine. I'm going to list all of the things that I use down in the bottom. So down in the comments. So, or not the comments, the description. So if you want to know what I used, it's going to be pretty easy, but I will list all that stuff down there. Alright, so this is my first video, by the way, of doing any painting at all, and I've learned some things from it. One, I have an insanely shaky hand, so that's why I take my other hand and steady it up when I go to painting. That's a big thing that you ought to do. Take that second hand, the one that is using the brush, and steady that hand up. Also, don't use a white background. Straight up. Don't. Beyond that, anyway, we're doing the first layer of white. Like I said, I was using Vallejo white, so I'm going over the black. One nice layer of white. It's probably gonna show through. I had to use a couple, maybe 3 layers to get the white to coat over it pretty well. I did this one kind of fast, but we'll kind of speed through this and let this first layer get out and get done. All right, with that first layer gone through, I kind of slapped it on there, went quickly, got that first layer down. I'm going to have to put another coat on it. Might even have to put another coat on it to get that white to really go down well on the black. So we'll go ahead and get into that second layer now. All right, now that we got our base layer down, we're going to put on a second layer to make sure we got a nice crisp white coat underneath to start putting the lighter layers on. So we'll go ahead and kind of rip through that real quick. Another big thing is if you get some where maybe it hadn't ought to be, don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. If you get a little bit on a spot where it's black, you can see on mine, I got a little bit there. Just go back over it with whatever color it was before. So you can fix that up. It's not that big a deal. But kind of try to pay as much attention because the better you get it on the first run, the less that you have to go and touch up. But if you miss a little bit, you touch a little bit where it's not supposed to be, it is what it is. It's not the end of the world. You can touch it up and fix it up afterward, and it's fine. But we're going to go ahead and move into the next color. We're using a Flash Gitz yellow. And it's a nice bright yellow from Citadel. So we're going to get into that. Let's get that running. with the first color layer going down, it's going to be yellow, because if you think of things that are molten, usually kind of brighter toward the center of it. So we're going to go over everything in yellow. Yellow's a nice bright color, especially the Flash Gitz yellow that Citadel has. We're going to go over it in that yellow, and that'll give a good base for the next color that we're going to try to blend in, which will be an orange into a red, and then a brown for the edges that are beginning to kind of lose their heat, into a very dark brown at the very tips, but we'll get into that. Let's just rip through this thing right here. Now that we have the yellow layer down, we can move on to orange, which is our next. And that I will be using Jokaero orange. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Jokaero. We can say it however you want to say it, but that's what we're using. It's base, and it's orange from Citadel. So, but with that down, if you look at the little nodes that are coming up from the very bottom of the sword, I know I wasn't holding it really awesome when it came to painting, because I'm just kind of learning on that too. But if you look, I'm leaving the tips of the nodes white. Now, I can go back and touch that up a little bit later, but that's where the source of the heat is coming from, theoretically. Or at least that's what I'm wanting to do with it. So that's going to kind of be the hottest part, and that's where the heat will go up into the sword. That's my theory when I'm doing it. So we're going to go around with the orange, and each of these layers for the very first, we'll be doing a light blending, but not a ton. I'll be doing, some stippling, which is kind of dotting maybe the area and just kind of dotting around, but you'll see what I'm doing when I go to actually paint on it here in just a second. But we'll go ahead and get that first layer down really well, and it'll look like there's a stark contrast, but we're going to come back after we get all of our colors laid out, and we'll kind of start blending them through lightly, and we'll get it. You can spend as much time on the blending as you want, and the more time you spend, it will blend better theoretically. But nothing's ever going to be perfect. In fact, as far as blending on, a molten, what's going to be a molten blade, uh, it's never going to be perfect anyway. There is no real perfection. There's going to be flaws in it, little bits and things. If you watch a video of somebody who is making a blade, like an actual blade, hammering it out, heating it up through the furnace. There's nothing uniform or perfect about it. The lines are kind of jagged, and it's how the heat is dissipating throughout the blade. So that's kind of the look you're wanting to give to your miniature. So let's go ahead and get into the next layer, which is going to be Jokaero orange. So with this orange, as I said, we're going to kind of make a bit of a stark contrast as we come around. Just going to give it that next layer, progressively moving further out from the center of that blade. Like moving little by little, moving further out with each darker color or different color, moving further and further out from the immediate heat source, which is going to be the nodes, and shooting up through the center of the blade. But as we go around, gonna go ahead and do that. I'm gonna kind of maybe stipple a little bit, but it gives kind of a jagged raw look to it, so you're not so you're not making a straight line that goes directly around it. If you've ever seen any kind of actual blade being made, it's never straight lines between the colors. So we're gonna kind of, miss-hit a couple, make this spot a little bit thicker, jut out a little bit. But right down there at the very bottom, want to make sure and get it right down to where the hilt handle, the handle connects to the actual blade itself. Make sure you get that color down in there. Again, if you touch any of the part that you have hit, or that you weren't supposed to hit, it's fine. Come back over it, fix it after it's done. So go ahead and get it all the way down on that very bottom. Everywhere can be touched up after it's all done. So let's go ahead and speed through this real quick as we're going through, and we'll keep on moving. Now that we got our orange down, Jokaero, we are moving on to red, which is going to be Evil Sunz Scarlet. It's a nice bright red, gives a really good contrast, and we'll be able to kind of blend that through as well. So let's get into it. Yikes! I forgot a very crucial thing to tell you guys, especially if you're in public and you are around other people who are playing the game or they're painting and getting ready. You absolutely have to put some paint on your hand, on your finger, somewhere. Just once you dip it in, you have to put a line on your hand. It makes you look superior to everybody else. It kind of tells you something, but the main reason for doing it is so everyone knows you're a pro. So now we are adding the red after we've got the orange in, and again, we will be progressively moving out further, and we're gonna kind of feather the outside of the sword. Want to get that edge real nice and red. That way it's getting darker and getting ready for the touch-ups of brown that are going to be the far edges. But you kind of use the side of the brush, learning how to hold the model to be able to get just the edges. That's just something, a few times you'll have to do it and do it. But it's not that tough, no matter what they say in the other videos. It's really not that tough. It's just learning how to have it in your hand. And the more you do it, the more you'll get comfortable and you won't even think about it anymore. Honestly, I'm probably not even doing it completely right, but it's giving me the result that I'm fine with. So, keep on moving around it a little bit. Again, not forgetting to get down in that very bottom. We will touch up the rest at the end, but make sure and get the tip edge of that sword and get down the sides, and then kind of touch around in that orange a little bit, getting ready for the blend that will be coming later. So let's go ahead and rip through this. All right, now that we have our main 3 colors down, we're not quite ready for the brown yet. We're going to come back around, and those edges that are so stark, the red, the orange, into the yellow, those edges that are so defined, we're going to go through and we're going to kind of trim around them. We're going to come back with orange and lightly go over it to begin the real blending process. Same way, orange into the yellow. But now we have the red, orange, and yellow down on our palette, whatever it is you're using for a palette. I don't care if you're using, your best friend's tongue. I don't care. But you have your 3 colors down, so now you can also blend those on the palette to make those colors less harsh as they come in. So we're going to go ahead and get into that. Check that out. Now, since I suck so supremely and can't keep my hand in the video, we'll kind of talk about it as I'm doing it, and in a second I will bring my hand back up. But we're going to start back down the color wheel. Now that we have that hard contrast of red around, then we're going to kind of start blending it back in. So we're going to go back to that Jokaero orange, and we're going to start lightening in that hard red edge that we've created. So drawing that on around, we're going to kind of stipple it a little bit and, maybe dot around a little, but we're going to kind of feather that edge, try to clean up that hard contrast of it. We're going to do that with the orange, and then once we get that decent, then we're going to come back with yellow to kind of soften and spread back into the orange and then into the red. Because, like I said, there is nothing uniform about anything that is molten. So we're going to come around it and come around it. We will get to the brown, but it's not quite coming yet. We are going to get to it. But let's go ahead and we're going to go ahead and get this blend beginning, and we will go from there. Let's just speed on up through this. Now, also throughout, since we have our yellow and our red and our orange that are already down on whatever it is you're using as a so-called palette, now is a good time to be able to drag a little bit of that red and then drag a little bit of that orange, mix it in to make a little bit more orangish red, to help dot around and create that blend. Same way with the yellow. You can take that orange into the yellow and mix just a little bit of it to make kind of a lighter, more yellowy orange moving into the yellow. And that's why we're going around and going around. You can spend as much time as you want on this specific step. This one's a little bit longer because we're just kind of going around and dotting and dotting and dotting, and then blending and grabbing edges, trying to take the sharp edges off. So spend as much time as you want on this until you get it the way you like it, but understand again, it's never going to be absolute perfection. You're just going to get it to a nice, good look. You're going to be sitting on the table. This old boy's going to have a blade that's molten coming at the enemy. So it's going to look pretty wicked compared to any regular silver sword. So take your time. Don't take your time. Have some fun with it. All right, now once you get your colors blended out pretty well, you get it where you kind of like it. Now it's time for brown. We're going to go through and we're going to highlight the hard edges. I use, what is this? Mournfang brown. Citadel color again. It is a kind of a lighter brown. So we'll start with that one. And then for the last highlight, we got Rhinox hide, which is a very deep, dark brown. But we're going to kind of get those edges. We'll use the Mournfang brown to go all the way kind of down, and then just around the very, very bottom, you'll get a little touch of that going across, but the full edges, and then we're gonna touch up at the very end, kind of hit those like hard high edges where it's farthest away from the heat source. We'll touch that with the dark brown and a little flare at the very end. You'll see. Now we're going to be moving on to that Rhinox hide and catching it around the edges. Now, again, if you get a little too much, like I just did, you can always kind of touch that up in the blending process. But we're just gonna kind of hit that top edge to give that nice contrast, giving it that real dark there at the very end. We'll do a couple touches around, but yeah, that's what we're gonna do with that Rhinox hide. Just gonna make a nice little dark edge around that outside. Give it that heat dissipation look. So now we've got that brown on, we've got the Rhinox hide to get right on those edges. Now it's touch up time. We're going to start with white. We're going to take that white and we're going to bring it right down through that very center piece of the sword on there. We're going to bring it right down through that center and to give it its, if you've heard the term, white hot. So we're going to drop that white right down through the center, and then we're going to do our last little feathering touch ups to bring those edges out. But it's not anything crazy. We're just doing kind of the finalizing, and again, you can take as much time as you want or as little time as you want. If you don't want it to be white in the center, you don't have to. But that white gives the eye that illusion of heat. The hotter it is down that center and the ends of the nodes that are that are emanating the heat that's coming through there. That gives that feeling of it being the supreme, the super hot right there on that. So the hot, super white hot right in the middle, feathering out to the yellow, easing into orange, into red, to where it's starting to cool around that far edge out to the brown, then the Rhinox hide on the edges. So let's get into that view. Now we're ready for that last little bit that I was telling you about. Since we got that Rhinox hide that's a nice, super dark brown, we're going to put just a couple little imperfection lines. If you watch while anybody's hammering out some actual steel, like hammering out a sword, um, you'll see that there's little imperfections in the steel or whatever product it is that they're using. So those little tiny lines, and just gives it a little more definition, makes it look cool. So that's it, my friends. That is it. You now have a Molten Blade. Honestly, the video is much longer than it takes to do it. It took me around 14-15 minutes, but explaining it on the video and all that, it just takes a little bit longer. But the more you do it, the more you get used to it. So You can do it with basic products. You can do it with basic brushes. It doesn't have to be the highest end crazy stuff. The longer you go, you may want to move into getting some nicer brushes and things like that, as I'm sure I will too. But it doesn't have to be that way. You can get started modest and you can still make something that's really cool. And if you found anything in this video that helped you out or gave you something fun to do, please hit that like and subscribe down there. And do not forget to nerd responsibly and have your DM spayed or neutered.